With more widespread use of social media platforms such as Instagram and TikTok, there has been a boom in influencer careers where people can share and influence others to purchase new items, particularly clothing. This has drastically changed the rate at which new styles in fashion emerge, resulting in higher turnover rates of new clothing and products, or in other words, fast fashion microtrends. We are seeing styles and trends change as quickly as a few weeks made of clothing that is of poor quality and meant to degrade in a short amount of time as corporations plan for styles to become obsolete at a much higher rate than before. Fast fashion corporations are growing bigger with excessive profits yielding from producing high volumes of product with low margins for manufacturing and material sourcing. To avoid high costs of production, fast fashion companies exploit cheap labor in overseas countries through subcontracting, which removes the responsibility of the company to uphold claims that their products are produced ethically and also removes liability from legal action that could occur as a result of the abuse and poor working conditions that these subcontracted factories allow. With increased pressure to source materials and labor more ethically, companies will publish code of conducts or code of ethics on their websites for consumers to view, providing them with a sense of relief that they are purchasing ethically. These codes of conduct, however, do not usually uphold in overseas factories where workers are under a separate jurisdiction, leaving the corporation with little control over factory working conditions. Factory workers are subject to extremely long working hours, low wages which hardly allow them to feed themselves, and dangerous working conditions where injury and even death are possible and not uncommon. Child labor is often utilized under these factories as a result as well. The increasing rate of clothing turnover has had dramatic effects on the environment and climate change as well. The constant overproduction of clothing that may not even be sold leads to piles of unused clothing sitting in landfills or collecting dust in warehouses. This overproduction of clothing creates excessive waste, and it seems as though corporations are doing little to address it. Not only are massive amounts of clothing and textiles ending up in landfills, the means of producing clothing materials also has devastating effects on climate change. It is estimated that the production of a single cotton t-shirt requires around 2,700 liters of water, which is equivalent to the amount of water that could sustain one human being for 2.5 years. With water scarcity already being a major issue worldwide, it is important to consider how much environmental impact is created to produce just one article of clothing, let alone the excess of clothing that fast fashion promotes. Farming materials such as cotton has adverse effects as it increases the need for pesticides and massive farms to grow these crops, resulting in soil degradation and decreased biodiversity among ecosystems. Cotton is among what is seen by the general public as a more sustainable clothing material, yet the excess in which it is being grown and produced is a direct result of irresponsible spending habits. Polyester is one material that is widely used among cheap clothing in fast fashion. It is uncomfortable and falls apart much more quickly than other materials like cotton or linen. Manufacturing polyester to be used in clothing is an energy-intensive process that requires large amounts of crude oil, which releases emissions and pollutes the air. Unfortunately, those who suffer the effects of climate change the most are marginalized communities in less developed areas. In the United States, this has been a result of redlining practices in zoning where people of color were pushed to inner city areas that are located near industrial sites, as they are less desirable than the suburbs where white people were able to move to. In overseas countries such as Southeast Asia and the Middle East, these communities may be made up of factory workers who are being exploited for their willingness to work for severely low wages. As there is an increasing need for action against climate change, it becomes important to keep in mind the populations of low-income people who disproportionately affected by not only the effects of climate change but also the actions that we make daily in our consumption habits. Understanding where your day-to-day items are coming from, how they are being produced, and who is producing them is critical to holding corporations accountable for the mistreatment of factory workers that they choose to exploit labor from. By understanding the cause and effects of their actions can help us to have resistance and demand better from large corporations, as they continue to increase their excessive profits while leaving the key components, factory workers, with barely livable wages, unsafe working conditions, and subjection to abuse and mistreatment by the factory owners that these corporations hire. It is critical to think beyond the code of conducts that are displayed on company websites and think about the reality of how and if these conducts are being upheld. This case study is a stark reminder that every article of clothing is handmade, and there is a person behind every garment that you wear.